Don't make the same mistake I made, putting some of my heavier food preps in totes instead of buckets like I did. Welcome back to Survival Existence. When I stored some of my food preps, I made the mistake of using totes such as these in order to store some of my food preps. While there isn't really that much weight in this upper tote, even including some of the items on top, nonetheless it was evidently entirely too heavy for this tote and this lid to be able to hold the upper tote up. As a consequence, I'm going to change the stuff in this tote out of here and put it in some other buckets and lids that I've purchased. I bought more buckets at Walmart to replace the tote that had collapsed on top of these already existing buckets, and I think it's a far better idea, and I don't believe it'll collapse under these buckets. These buckets I could stack literally to the ceiling and they wouldn't collapse. The totes, on the other hand, are really not designed to hold that much weight, and certainly not any weight on top of them. If you're going to load them heavy, they need to be in single stack. Otherwise, if you double or triple them, whatever you put in there needs to be extremely light, or they, I'm sure, will collapse just like mine did. Don't make the same mistake I did. I bought some more buckets from the store, along with the lids, to replace the totes that I had in here. And I firmly believe they'll work far better. I don't think that there's enough in those particular totes to take up the space of all 6 of these buckets, which would be good because I would simply have more space to put more preps. And while I have quite a bit of food here, certainly enough that'd last me and my family well over a year, it never hurts to have even more. I'm going to start with sugar as I load the items into these buckets. Either before I put the lid on them or immediately after, I'll label each bucket with what's contained in the bucket. That way, if the occasion ever comes that I need to actually use these preps, I'll know already what's in the buckets, and I won't have to start just simply opening buckets to find out what's in it. I'm going to start the first one with sugar. And load each one of them up as much as I possibly can. I have most of my preps stored in these shrink wrap bags, but these go back, in some cases, some of these items go all the way back to '09 and before. And before, I really didn't know Mylar bags even existed. Be honest with you, at least not in the sense of being able to use them for prepping. I knew they existed for putting all chips and various other foods in containers by commercial manufacturers. And while I have in the past used these bags, like from a food saver, I would be far better off to use the 5-gallon Mylar bags, or the bags that are large enough to use in a 5-gallon bucket. You can store considerably more, and it takes up more of the space of the empty space inside the bucket. Now I'll start loading the salt in these other buckets, or in this other bucket. This is non-iodized salt, and actually I have it stored to cure meats if necessary. You can purchase curing salt. It has a great deal of nitrates in it. It's very good for preserving meat, but nitrates can be a carcinogen, so I opted to use just plain regular non-iodized salt. So that's what I store. Now we have some rice we can put away. And some of this rice I'm not real happy with how it has stored in this container. I'm sure those in the other buckets are sealed off and sealed well, but I'm not happy with this rice. So I think I may simply turn this rice into some heating bags and throw the rest of it away, but I'm not particularly satisfied storing the rice in this method. Now that I have in these buckets what I need to put in them for right now, which is going to be salt and 2 sugars, I'm going to go ahead and label them. I'll end up with 3 completely empty buckets that I can put more preps in, but for right now I'm going to label these with the salt and the sugar in them. I will go ahead and put the lid on these good and tight, make sure they're sealed against any weather or any vermin that may pass through deciding they would like a free meal. Even on these empty buckets, I'm going to go ahead and close them. Now that I have these buckets capped off and stable, I'll put one tote back on top of it. I just simply keep a few odd and end things like a few spices, some gravies, a little cooking oil, some ramen noodles, tea, things like that in this one, so that I have easier access to some of these spices if I do need some of my preps. In some other buckets that I have stored around home, I have other spices, of course, but these are far easier to get to. I believe I'm going to put this extra tote that the lid was destroyed on and under the bottom of this just to keep it out of the way until I find a use for it. I, of course, won't throw it away, but nonetheless, the lid that came with it was destroyed when the totes collapsed. But this will leave a good place, will serve as a good place to leave this tote. Just simply keep it up and out of the way. When this tote collapsed, it dumped everything that I had back here pretty much in the floor. And I use it to stack stuff on, keep it up and out of the way, such as paper goods and a few little odd and end things like onions, stuff that I normally use throughout any given week or month. Not as a permanent storage area, obviously, but as some place to store some things that I do use often. I also use this room as a radio comms room and as a pantry. That way I come into this room and I can check my preps regularly, or at least some of my preps regularly, and keep a pretty good eye on them. These are the things I normally keep on top of this tote, which in some ways it's really too much, but the paper goods, such as toilet paper, that's some of the stock I have, but it's what I use out of, so I'd rather leave it in here and in this place make it easier to get to. Plus, its width goes from one side of the tote to the other, so it really distributes its weight all about the sides instead of just on the lid where it'll collapse. These other things are relatively light and not that big of a deal. This has been Bobby with Survival Existence, helping you help yourself. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at Survival Existence. Come visit us on Facebook at Survival Existence. Also, come visit us at our website at survivalexistence.com. Have a good day.